Welcome to Easily Entertained. My name is Bryson Olson, and here we talk about all good things about entertainment for the most part. Today, I really wanted to talk about the Wicked sequel, Wicked for Good, that has kind of gotten a lot of mixed reviews, and I think kind of rightfully so. Not saying it isn't enjoyable, but there are some things that could have been better. There's some things that are good, and there's some things that I think really could have been better. So let's just dive right in and talk about Wicked for Good. Let's talk about For Good, what the sequel actually did that I thought was either improved or just, on the same level of the first one. First thing, kind of obvious, is the musical performances. They are all so good at their singing, their choreography. It is all very impressive with that aspect. I mean, obviously from the leads, Ariana and Cynthia are doing crazy, practically flawlessly doing it, especially on Cynthia's part. She does absolutely incredible during this sequel. I love it. And I think a lot of the songs still are, technically very impressive and sound really good. And that side of it, I think, is all very much in line with the first movie. Sometimes you kind of get, with things like shows, like if you have a musical show, sometimes as you go on, some of the songs hit, some of them don't. I don't think all the songs hit in this one, but from a technical aspect, their actual performances are fantastic. I think they do a great job there. I think in addition to that, and in fact, in a lot of the songs, you kind of get to see the dynamic strengthened between Glinda and Elphaba a lot more, which I think is really good. I kind of just like the way they interact, whether they're singing or not. And that really just does come down to Ariana and Cynthia's performance. They are doing an amazing job. And I think it helps that they very much seem like friends in real life, at least just in their interviews. They seem to be very connected with each other, and you can tell that it translates to the screen as well. They're not just doing it for the performance side of it. They seem to genuinely have a deep connection and care for one another, sometimes to a point that it's really weird in some of their interviews, but overall seems to be very much worth it for the performances and the story in Wicked for Good. I think that is really good. And I'm not sure if they were filming it at the same time as the first one. I don't think so, because some things do look a little bit different in terms of just physical appearances. Like that time has passed a little bit. So I'm assuming not, like they had maybe started filming while it was on its theatrical run, but I don't know, but that just kind of seemed to get stronger with the second movie, which I think is good. Another thing that I also like for the most part is the set and costume designs. Much like the first movie, they are amazing at putting us into the fantastical world of Oz. You get the kind of zany, colorful sets and costumes that I think people tend to associate with this world. The only thing is I do think they used a little bit more CGI this time than in the first movie, and I think it's a little bit more apparent. They used a lot of practicals in the first one, and in this one, I'm assuming for time reasons, they switched to a little bit more CGI. And overall, it's not terrible, but a little bit of it is you're like, ooh, that is CGI right there. Like, I can tell that is not fake. Like, the animals are obvious, but, there are some sets where you're like, I cannot tell if it's real or fake, because there's something off about it, and so you assume it's probably fake. And, that could have been intentional, it could have not been. I think if you're going to go either practical or CGI, your audience shouldn't know. There shouldn't be that uncanny valley feeling of, is this real or is it not real? So that, I think they could have been in better, but overall, the style wise, I think is fantastic for the second movie too, because we kind of get to see a little bit more. And so you get to see more of, it's not just the school, it's not just the Emerald City. You actually get to see more of Oz, so that kind of varies a little bit. And one thing that I think is super simple, but I think it's a really great note for these movies. when Dorothy arrives, from the original Wizard of Oz story, they don't ever show her face. And they could have. There have been other adaptations of the Wizard of Oz through plays and things like that, so they could have shown her face. But I think to kind of tie it in, I think especially because Universal produced it and they were the ones who did the original, they didn't ever show her face. They didn't get a look-alike or CGI, like de-aging kind of thing, like to try and like mimic the original Dorothy. They just kind of left it up to your imagination, kind of paying homage to that story and being like, it could be the same Dorothy. It could exist within the same world, which I think is an awesome little callback, a little note that they did that is, it's not super impactful to the story if we saw Dorothy. That wouldn't really change how it feels, but from, a filmmaking perspective and from an industry perspective, I think that is a good little homage to it, and I like that aspect of it. Now it's time for the mid type stuff, things that could have been improved, like they were fine, but overall they're not great. They didn't expand on, or they didn't meet the same level that the first movie did. One, I know I talked about it in the last section about the music, but I'm gonna recall that just a little bit. Performances, I still think fantastic. I think they're all really good, and that goes for leads and extras, choirs and everything. I think that it all sounds great, but story-wise, they feel a little flat. And I think a lot of that is due to it being a part 2, and I think taking a lot of the music just from the musical version, the play. And as a result, this part of the movie is the same as the second half of the play. So an intermission has happened and then they've come back. As such, the movie essentially starts with a bunch of reprisals. All the songs feel like they're just the same from the first movie, and I understand why, but in a movie standpoint, that makes them feel a little bit less dynamic. They're not servicing the story the same way that the first songs were doing. These ones are just, it's starting the movie off and you're like just recapping everything essentially, which is not how, I don't know, maybe that's how the play does it, but I don't think in the movie context, that's how it should have been done. I think, if they were lacking some songs, maybe they should have made some new ones or readjusted them to feel less like reprisals, because it does kind of take away from the story. It doesn't feel like we're getting any new information. It's not progressing the story along. It is just, here's some of the same, like almost trying to hook in the audience again. Like I said, like the first movie kind of does it all like fantastically on its own, and then this one's like, oh, we could keep up with that, so we're gonna give you the same music. And I don't think that was a particularly great idea. And I was not the director of this movie, so I can't really say anything on that part, on how they decided to do that. Just from a viewer's perspective, especially someone who hasn't read the book and I have never watched the musical, it doesn't feel right in that regard. So, some of that could have been better. I think after the beginning of the movie, it gets a little bit better. I still don't think the music numbers hit the story as hard as the first movie does, but they're all new songs. I kind of already mentioned this in the last section. There just seemed to be more CGI compared to a lot of the practical in the first movie. I've tended to notice that in like these part movies that kind of have happened in recent years. For example, the Mission Impossible last two movies, so it was, Dead Reckoning and The Final Reckoning. Dead Reckoning, they did and they didn't at the same time. So, you know, Tom Cruise is always trying to be like, oh, we're doing things practical. There's not a lot of CGI and stuff. And I feel like 3 Mission Impossibles ago at Fallout, they did a really good job of being like, look at all these practical stunts that are happening. Dead Reckoning did a little bit less, but they were trying to hype it up a lot, which I thought was really good. And then it didn't feel like they did hardly anything for Final Reckoning, at least prior to the movie coming out. Much like that, Wicked did, like, in behind the scenes stuff prior to the first movie coming out, was like, check out all these practical things. We were like, that is freaking awesome. That makes it look super cool. And then they didn't seem to do that, at least as far as I could tell, for this one, which I think is a disservice, because the practical effects made the first one awesome. Because I remember being like, and you know, the trailers did nothing for it. The trailers make it look even more fake. And I remember saying that last year, that when I then watched the movie, I'm like, whoa, that does not have the same vibe as what the trailer does. And it makes it worth it that they're using practicals. They did not seem to do that this time, which I don't love. I wish they did more of the practicals. And, you know, some of the things I kind of understand, like some of the sets and the action in this one kind of need a little bit more CGI, but they worked around it in the first one. And I think, you know, they kind of could have counteracted it with this one to make that feel a little bit better. That's just my opinion. I do think, because it's a part 2, it's supposed to be the latter half, the pacing feels off. It does not feel contained like the first one did. Like I said, the first one, you could watch the first movie, it ends, and that could be it. It could have been done there. They could have honestly just decided, hey, we're only doing the first half, and that would have been fine. People would have been like, oh man, but there's so much other stuff. And it's like, okay, I understand, but from a storytelling perspective, and especially from a movie perspective, that first movie has a solid beginning, middle, and end. This movie does not. It feels like the beginning took place in a different movie, and I don't love that. It means you can't like, I get it, it's a part movie, so you kind of have to watch them together, but the first one, you don't have to. You could watch the first one, never watch the second one, and be completely fine. If you watch this second movie, you have had to have seen the first one, because of all the stuff that happens in the first one ties into the second one. You're obviously not going to watch the second one before you watch the first one, but you could do a sequel that makes it feel pretty contained. That is possible to do, and they did not do that. And as such, it makes it feel almost as if things are missing, because you are supposed to watch them as one. You're not supposed to watch that, like, it's the story. It was made in terms of like the musical, it was made to be watched all at once, not just one thing at a time. You're not going to watch the first half, go do something else for a couple days, and then come back and watch the second half. No, you would watch the whole thing at once. And because of that, and stretching it out like this, it doesn't work for me. And I think that bit could have been improved. It's not the worst thing, but it definitely could have been improved. Now for the stuff that I definitely think they did not do great. Like, it's not as redeemable as the last section. Most of this doesn't have to do with the actual movie itself, you know, like the production, everything. Because the movie, like, there are things that could be improved at, but as a movie, it's not terrible. The only thing regarding that is the feeling behind the movie, you know, the emotion. This one did not sell them for me, hardly at all. The first one, I knew virtually nothing about Wicked. You know, I knew that it was a story about the Wicked Witch and about Glinda the Good Witch, and, you know, it's kind of their origin story, but I didn't know all the little details, and that movie sold me. I felt those emotional moments, even though I had no context on anything. I only had the movie. I know a lot of people got really emotional with the first movie because they knew about the musical. They've read the books. So that stuff feels really strong for them. But for this sequel, I only have the context of the first movie because I still haven't seen the musical. I haven't read the books. And I felt hardly anything for this one. The emotional beats did just not seem to be there. I could tell they were trying, but they did not seem to actually hit for me. And, I'm not saying they have to make the movie for me, but if I'm feeling that way, I think a lot of other people might be feeling that way because, like I said, the movie kind of has some mixed reviews, and I think the emotional side of it in the second movie has to be some of the reason why, because people felt a good, strong connection with that first movie. Everyone was raving about it. I was raving about it. The first movie was awesome. And then the second movie, it was fine. It was fine. And the emotional moments were just not really there for me. So there's that aspect. Outside of the movie now, so we're not talking about that. Marketing for this sequel. Abysmal, in my opinion. They pushed the hell out of the first Wicked. It was everywhere. There were a ton of trailers. They had a ton of behind the scenes. They had tons of interviews. And that, I think, helped it really succeed. Along with some unintentional marketing, like the very strange interviews from Ariana and Cynthia, or the accidental rage baiting of Cynthia, like that whole poster situation that had happened, which I think had gotten figured out, and that was fine. But those things all really added up and hyped up the movie a lot. This time around, it did not feel that way to me. It was a little lackluster. And part of that I do think is due to its part 2 status. So everyone's like, oh, you guys made me watch something last year. Now I gotta go watch it again. Or, I gotta watch the first movie again before I see this one. Or you're making me spend more money. That kind of stuff. Plus, all the good shit happens in the story at the beginning. In the first movie, and since you have to stretch the last half over the same amount of time when the first one was already the time that the whole musical is, it tends to make it not feel as worthwhile to go see another movie. And also the marketing just seemed to be products this year. It was the Google Pixel, it was Febreze, it was, I don't know. It was a bunch of things. It wasn't about the movie, which I didn't love. It was so they could put pink and green on a bunch of things and sell it as Wicked branding. But we didn't get a lot of actual Wicked material. They did that a lot last year. I'm not saying they didn't do that. But last year, you had Wicked and Wicked branding. This year, you have Wicked branding, a little itty bit of Wicked. So you don't have a lot. And as a result, I don't think that sells the movie as well. Cynthia and Ariana also didn't have strange interviewers as much this time. They've had a little bit of weirdness during their interviews this time, but it's not the same. It's not the same as last year, where the interviewers were just as weird, asking very strange questions, which just caused a bunch of viral clips to go around everywhere. And that just didn't seem to happen this time. Now it was just the clips from last year circling around. So nothing felt new. I don't know about their box office. I didn't check their box office numbers, but I think it hurts the sequel in terms of its status as a movie. It just did not live up to the grand spectacle that the first movie did. And I think it's kind of sad because, as a whole, they probably could have been fantastic. However, it's because they released them as 2 parts that seems to be the problem. And I think the reason they split them up, and this is my other reason for why this movie kind of meh, is because I think they split them up 100% for a cash grab. They could hold out the Wicked hype as long as they could by putting them into 2 movies. And, I don't know what was added or taken away from either half compared to the play or compared to the book. But it seems to me that a lot of it could have been condensed to just be the same length as the musical, or maybe slightly longer. This is a big story, and it's a big grand story. I would have been fine if Wicked was one of those 3-hour movies, had they paced it correctly. And, if they treat it like a musical and kind of, maybe they give them the intermission. They're like, everyone, we got 15 minutes, we got 10 minutes, you can go take a little break in the middle of the movie. I think that would have been a very fun movie theater experience. But the studios definitely wanted to make more money and didn't feel like it could translate as good to the movie, to the big screen, if they didn't split it. They could have done it better. They could have just done better marketing. You can't fix the story aspect in some cases, but you still could have reached that same level of hype. But I don't think they did that effectively with the second movie, And that's my opinion. If you disagree, you can tell me to kick rocks. That's fine. I understand. But that's my thoughts on Wicked. I liked it. I probably won't watch the second one again, but I have several times watched the first one again because the first one's pretty good. So, that's my thoughts on it. And speaking of, let's talk about our easily entertained rating system. If you don't know what that is, from least to best, our rating scale is garbage, once is fine, right mood, quotable, go to, and all day, every day. And I'm about to hurt everyone's feelings on this one. This one is definitely a right mood for me. It's almost a once is fine. It's not that bad though. Some movies I'm like, oh, you could watch it once and you could never watch it again. I probably won't watch it again. But, I know people, you probably know people, maybe you will watch it again. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with wanting to watch it again. So that's why I'm going to put it at right mood. I think I would have to watch the first one again. And maybe if I was in the mood, I'd be like, okay, let's watch the second one too. But I cannot guarantee that's going to happen. So that's why it's not getting a higher rating for me on that. Like I said, if you have a different opinion, you can let me know in the comments. Tell me to kick rocks if you think Wicked for Good is, the second coming of the Wicked franchise. But that is it for this episode of Easily Entertained. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe so you can be notified of all new episodes when they come out, because we're a little sporadic sometimes, but then you can be notified, hit that bell icon. But until next time, bye.